light enough to pick the car up.
Welcome back to today's episode. Today we are going to be cutting out the boot floor, welding in a new bead-rolled floor piece, making sure that it is sealed, starting to build the firewall. Let's get to it. And then I've got this lovely piece of 75B40, and then that, once trimmed, will sit in and across underneath, and it'll be welded to provide some structure across the chassis. Right, so drilled all the holes in this rear cross member, and I'm giving something a go that we haven't done before on the channel, which is 3D printed dimple dies. So they are 75% infill with 4 wall layers, so pretty solid, and they do fit very nice. So what I've done is I've just drilled a hole through the centre and then put a bolt through, welded a nut to a washer that just screws onto the back, and then I'll be able to tighten them up. So this is what it looks like so far. This is 2mm thick, so I'm not really sure how it will go, but I think for what it's worth, I'll give it a try. If it all fails, I'll have to buy some proper dimple dies, but fingers crossed, this should work mint. So yeah, let's cut to the time lapse of me giving it a go. Some of today's progress so far, I have welded on the rear mounts with some captive nuts so we can have the rear support. I've then done this side, made a nice piece here just to go up here, and then we're going to have the firewall along there, along the back. 2 pieces here, it's still to be welded in, grinded down, looking flush and clean. And fill this gap because this is quite weak metal. And then over to this side, I've just started stitch welding the turret, and then I'm going to go around and do the opposite there. The fuel cell is going to sit here, and then that's going to make it nice and easy for access. Dom's been working on the trans tunnel, so we need a big old trans tunnel for the V8, but sadly in the Nissan it doesn't sit straight, as the floor on the left is higher than the floor on the right. So yeah, right, hello, day 2, welcome back. So yesterday we were really productive, got part of this side done, bit of the back piece. Plan of action is to make a new piece to go across the back of the firewall, connect to where I've made a new plate for the boot floor, weld that up, make sure that's nice, solid, clean and secure so smoke can't come back into the cab, and then to continue with the firewall, bead rolling, all the rest of it. So yeah, let's do some work. Just been making a template for one of the side pieces. The chassis doesn't appear to be perfectly straight, so I'm having to make the best of it, and I cut this beautiful piece out, and before I be-drilled, checked, fettled, turns out it's too short in certain places. So the tape is adding on what I need to add on to my next template. So, template number 2. So I'm going to get to cutting this out, fettling, putting it up, and then I'm going to be-drill it the same as the other one, and then once that's done, I will then put it on the clean it up, put it on the car, weld it in, and that'll be the start of our rear firewall for the fuel cell and radiator pack. So let's get to it. In the last episode, you saw that we created a firewall, a rear chassis piece tied into the rails, which allows us to run a bash bar, which we can jack off.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
So we're going to be finishing off the firewall. We're going to make sure that it's secured, sealed, and safe. The most important things whilst drifting, we want to know that if there is a fire, can't get into the compartment. I'm not made for tight spaces. It's hard for me to get out of the car with the cage. I don't want to be caught in a situation where I might get burnt. Okay, so we've now got this piece welded in. Plan of action is to use the card to make our next piece of firewall. This piece here, this basically shows where the main firewall is going to sit, up to the cage. And then at the cage it'll go back, but that's to indicate how far to go. So I've essentially got to cut some card now to this shape to go around the back of the turret to then tie in to the piece made here. So I better get to it. So the first thing that I'm going to be doing here is mocking up the firewall with some cardboard. This card is quite good, it's not too thick, it's nice and malleable, and essentially our firewall is going to run from here to the cage, and then it's going to be welded along to the cage so it's nice and secure, and then a secondary piece up to the top. So we'll mock it out first with the cardboard, we'll make sure that that fits, we'll then trace that onto some steel, draw out some nice bead rolls so that we can get it nice and put a bit of strength into it so it doesn't ripple, and then I think that'll be enough to get us going really, and then it's just a case of tacking it in and make sure it's all secure and there's no leaks. So the firewall will sit to the back of the chassis and this will go all the way along, and at the end we'll tie in to our sidewall pieces here, and then that'll secure and weld into the bottom all the way along. So I will start marking out. Okay then, so the firewall is now cut, it's in situ, so what I'm going to do is take it back out, mark out for the bead rolling. Not sure yet whether it's going to be indented, kind of pressed, or whether it's just going to be some normal beads just around, or maybe some X's. I don't know as of yet. I'll mock it up and I'll see what I think. But as for fitment, currently a little bit here, but I'm going to leave that just for tacking, and then it should just sit along the firewall. Put some holes periodically along here just to tie into the cage, and then the bottom half of the wall when it's in will sit flush, and then I'll make a couple of small plates to come from here to tie them together. And I'll probably just make the pieces and then dimple dye them just so they look nice, and that I can tack them in and they're nice and sturdy, nice and strong, and then it's sealed then. And then just to work on the next half then, which will come up from here to the roof, I think. This kind of angle, and then I'm going to make some side pieces to come in here and then tie them all together. And I think then it should look quite nice. It should be quite solid, and there'll be no issues then with the firewall. So I'm going to go get to marking out and to bead rolling. So the first half of the firewall is complete. It just requires stitch welding in all the way around, and then cleaning up so that it'll be ready to weld in. So it just needs stitch welded in, and the second piece will now come up here. So yeah, I'll get to grinding. The firewall's in situ. We're going to weld along the top first and then move the bottom in afterwards. Do a little bit of fettling. So we're going to be using the MIG. This is a Lincoln MIG. We're going to pop the MIG on. Just going to set it in synergic to 1.2. Make sure 0.8 for the wire speed, 1.2 for the settings, -1.4, synergic TT. Turn the gas on. We're going to be running absolute minimum that we can get away with. 5 to 6 litres per minute. Right. Cage is tied in. So the cage is tied in, as you can see. These welds need to be ground down, and then stitch welding down the bottom, and then on the other side we'll weld it in, and then here these pieces will be welded along, creating a nice secure seam against the bulkhead. Right, so my brain is absolutely frazzled. I'm trying to do the second half of the firewall, but I want you to match the bead rolling of the first half of the firewall. It's really difficult to try and make measurements on things that are custom made, and trying to get them identical is really challenging. So far, this is the plan. So the measurement has to be offset to the same as the other side, but here. So I've worked out the measurements and then rotated so it's upside down, so it'll match. Now I've just got to bead roll this. My bead roller isn't wonderful. It's Chinese. It's rubbish. It makes it really difficult to get the angles, so I keep having to go forwards and backwards and try and not flip the dies, because if I flip the dies it presses the opposite way, so without realising sometimes on different angles I'm making more of a job. Honestly, the guys that do this professionally, like, amazing, but I'm going to try my best, and we'll see what the outcome looks like. I'm going to then try weld it in. Once it's welded in, we'll grind it all down, clean it up, and then seal it with some fireproof sealer. But yeah, what a technical, difficult thing to get your head around. Once you get your head around, it's not horrendous, but getting your head around the actual bead rolling process is quite difficult. No folding can happen prior to that, so everything's got to be bead rolled first, then folded after, which is really difficult, really hard to get your head around. But like I say, managing, hopefully this works, and we can get on top of getting a new bead rolled firewall. Okay, so during the time lapse you'll see me stop midway, and there was a mistake made. So the mistake made was that I went the wrong way with the bead roller, and that led to me putting in the bead on the opposite way. So this is a big problem, so I've had to go back over it from a different angle. Anyway, the constraints of the vise have wound me up, so what I've ended up doing is just taking some CDS tube, cutting 2 slots, and creating just a piece of steel that can rotate in the vise to make things easier. And I've managed to somewhat fix my mistake. So the mistake that I made here was that the bead was the opposite way, but I've corrected that now, and it's not perfect. It's never meant to be perfect, but it's better. So at least now we've got the bead in, and it looks somewhat reasonable. A little bit of metal work down here to clean this up, make it a bit straighter, and then fit it in the car and weld it in. Not a professional fabricator by any means at all, sorry, but I'm trying. And once that's fit, I'll then press some holes in the bottom and then tack it to the cage, weld it to the top, and then we should be somewhere near. It's been quite an effective morning so far. We have got the rear bash bar. So this will be the rear chassis where we make the mounts for the radiator, tie it into the rear quarters, and then we'll mount our bumper off this with some 22mm steel. So yeah, so far it has been quite an effective morning. These are going to be our fuel cell mounts. We're welding a gusset there to make it nice and strong. And we have picked up some over fenders, plus 50mm. They're not the best, but they were cheap and they fit well. So yeah, so now showing you how light the back end is. So it's safe to say we should be able to jack off this. I mean, it's light enough to pick the car up. So if I can pick it up, we can defo jack off it. We're gonna have to measure the widths here, make sure that there is enough gap to keep it to the normal space, and then tie these in to this bar, and then make radiator mounts for the radiator as well. With this new back end, it'll just mean if we bump it, bang it, anything like that, we don't have to mess around. We can literally just take it off, have another one ready to go. With us using the lorry to transport the drift cars, we have 12 tons capacity, so it doesn't matter. We can have 2 of these, we can have another set of bumpers, wheels galore, so it really doesn't matter. So that's the plan of action.